Hi guys, welcome to the first dispatches of 2025, which will be January of course, but I'm actually recording this on Monday the 30th of December 2024. I hope everyone had a great Christmas. I had a pretty good Christmas apart from catching a cold, which I've just got rid of. I think I got it in Edinburgh when I was visiting there. However, I'm back hale and hearty. And as you can see, there's a whole table full of goodies right in front of you. So without further ado, let's get down to what you see here. Now, on my left here, right at the back, are two of our brand new Hawker Hurricanes. Now, as those of you that have been with us for many years know, the Hawker Hurricane next to the Spitfire has probably been our best-selling British aircraft. Maybe even best-selling World War II aircraft. But we've been sold out of Hurricanes for quite a few years now, and we thought it was only fair that we revisit that classic Battle of Britain fighter. And when it comes to classic Battle of Britain fighters, these two Hurricanes are two of the very best, and let me explain why. You'll see that if you look closely, there's two different markings on each aircraft, LED and DTA. These two particular aircraft belonged to two of the most famous air aces of the Battle of Britain, and that is Squadron Leader Douglas Bader and Squadron Leader Bob Stanford Tuck. Now, both of these men had exceptional stories, particularly Douglas Bader. Now, if any of you don't know, Douglas Bader was someone that joined the Royal Air Force as long back as, I think it was 1928, at the age of 18. He was commissioned in 1930, and in 1931 he was a bit of a hotshot aerobatics pilot, and he had a real reckless streak in him. Anyway, sometime in 1931 he was performing low-level aerobatics, and what he actually did was he decided to do some kind of barrel roll at a fairly low level just above the ground. Well, something went wrong, or he obviously misjudged something, and his aircraft clipped its wing and then went into the ground. Terrible crash. He was lucky to survive, and although he survived, he lost both of his legs. And even though after a long period of convalescence he actually performed to the very best of his ability and passed all his flight checks to fly again, the Air Force decided that he could not fly in those days anyway, and he was basically invalided out of the Royal Air Force. I'm not quite sure what he did during the rest of the 1930s, but when war broke out in 1939, he applied to rejoin the Air Force. Well, they made him sit all the tests again, and he performed everything to the very best of his ability, and by everyone's assessment, he was an excellent pilot. So the RAF decided to give him another chance, and he was really starting to fly operationally at the time of the Battle of France, and I believe he shot down his first enemy aircraft over Dunkirk in 1940. Well, by the time that the Battle of Britain really began after the fall of France, Douglas Bader had been promoted to squadron leader, and he was put in charge of number 242 Squadron, which was made up of mostly Canadian pilots who actually had suffered greatly during the Battle of France, and morale was really low. Well, Bader was a great one for getting everyone onto the same program and getting everyone in the same team. And he was an inspired leader, not always the easiest man to get on with. However, he did wonders for 242 Squadron and led them to a great number of victories over the Germans, and of course he increased his own kill ratio as well. Well, his luck ran out in 1941 when his aircraft, at first it was thought he'd been shot down. In actual fact, in subsequent years it's been proven that actually his aircraft was in a collision with a German aircraft, and he had to bail out, and they bailed out over France. Interesting story was when he landed in France, he was picked up, or the squadron that either not shot him down, but collided with him, was one led by Adolf Galland, the great German air ace. And Galland had heard about Douglas Bader and actually invited him to the officers' mess for dinner at his airfield. And that was the beginning of a strange friendship that actually continued after the war. Anyway, cut a long story short, Bader was then sent to several prison camps where he made a bit of a nuisance of himself, and eventually ended up in what they called the bad boys prison of Colditz Castle in eastern Germany. And he remained there until 1945, when he was liberated by the US Army. He immediately returned to the UK, was flying again, and in fact led the Flying Victory Parade to celebrate the end of the war in Europe. And Bader was flying again a Spitfire at that time and led the entire RAF contingent. After that, he left the Air Force, went back into the private world, and ended up working for Shell BP and doing all kinds of flying duties with them, which he did for many, many years. But he also did a lot of charity work, especially for disabled young people, and he was very inspirational in that, to such an extent that I believe it was in the 1970s sometime, he was knighted by the Queen, became Sir Douglas Bader. He passed away in, I believe it might have been 1981, I think it was 1981 actually. But an amazing story. His life story was told in a biography and a movie, Reach for the Sky, and he was played by the famous British actor Kenneth More. So, moving on to the other pilot, this chap here, flying DTA. Bob Stanford Tuck also joined the Royal Air Force pre-war, and by the time war broke out, took part to some degree in the Battle of France and the fight in the air over France, and then the Battle of Britain. He had an amazing score record where he shot down multiple German aircraft in one day, and he did that several times. Anyway, by the end of his active flying career, meaning he also was shot down over France in 1942, he had 27 confirmed kills, making him one of the top scoring Royal Air Force aces of World War II. But he again was sent to a POW camp, remained there until early 1945, when himself and another pilot, I think it was a Polish pilot, managed to escape and hid for quite a few weeks before they made their way towards the Russian lines and were picked up by the Red Army, and who eventually returned them to the UK. Bob Stanford Tuck was flying, he was the squadron leader of the number 257 squadron, called the Burma Squadron, because all of the aircraft in that squadron had been paid for by the government, or the colonial government of Burma. This is another thing during World War II, that many individual aircraft were either paid for by a rich individual, maybe in memory of someone, or by a local council, or some kind of large body that could afford to pay for a Spitfire, or even a squadron of Spitfires or Hurricanes. In this case, 257 Squadron were also flying Hurricanes. Both of these Hurricanes, by the way, are new sculpts, completely new. They're not just the same sculpt, different paint jobs than the original ones we did. These are all brand new with a lot more detail. And if you get to see these up close, you'll see how much better they are than the original ones, which were pretty good, but these are better. So that's our two Battle of Britain Hurricanes, and I should let you know that we're already working on brand new Spitfires as well, again for the Battle of Britain. And let's go into something else, something completely different. From the Battle of Britain 1940, We go back almost 2 millennium to the streets of ancient Rome, and you'll see all of these figures here, and it's quite a collection. We've got a little group of stonemasons. We've got the long-awaited butcher and the butcher's table. We've got a lady out doing her shopping. We've got a foreman or maybe even just a spectator watching what's happening. And then we've got another little two-man set here. It's again a worker and his boss, and they're obviously conversing. So that's really useful little add-ons. Streets of ancient Rome. This little figure here is actually a drummer of the Royal Hong Kong Regiment, the Volunteers. Now again, as some of you know, I was fortunate enough to be a member of the regiment from 1980 until it was disbanded in 1995, 2 years before the handover. Now, one of the interesting things about not just the regimental drummer, but the whole regimental band that we had at that time, if you knew the composition of the regiment, basically among the officers, it was maybe half and half between local Hong Kong guys and expatriates and other Commonwealth citizens like myself and several of the other guys. But the rank and file of the regiment were all Hong Kong Chinese boys. Great bunch of guys, loved working with them, and very good soldiers. The regimental band, however, was something completely different. The regimental band had a very large proportion of Filipino musicians. Now, the reason for that was that here in Hong Kong in those days, there was lots of nightclubs and bars that employed Filipino musicians. And Filipinos are very talented musically and everything else, but music-wise, they're the best. Anyway, apart from doing their normal nighttime jobs, working in a nightclub or a bar or what have you, a lot of these guys wanted to earn a little bit extra money. And one way they could do that was by joining the regimental band, because as a regimental musician, you also get paid the same as the soldiers. In fact, I think you got a little bit extra. Anyway, I'd say many of these bandsmen were actually Filipinos, and we couldn't have done without them. Anyway, I thought as a little tribute to the Filipinos in the regiment, I would make a little figure of a drummer. And here you have him, and he's in his tropical white tunic and ceremonial dress uniform, the rest. Great little add-on. So if you've been collecting any of our Hong Kong regiment figures, you've got a nice little add-on here. Right next to him is something not entirely completely different, but it's the Royal Navy on parade, and this is the latest addition to our ceremonial series that mostly has featured regiments like the Black Watch, the Coldstream Guards, the Blues and Royals, the Life Guards, and probably the Royal Marines. Anyway, we've had the request to do Royal Navy figures, and I always think the Navy looks very smart on parade, especially with the white gaiters, the white waist belts, and as you see them here. So we thought, well, let's do 7 little figures that show the Navy on parade. So what we've got are a commander with his naval sword leading this little parade here. Behind him is a sub-lieutenant who's carrying the white ensign. Now the white ensign is actually the flag that's flown on all Royal Navy ships, shore establishments, or on parade, whatever. It's the flag symbol of the Royal Navy. And it's very, very famous. And of course, Hong Kong was one of the Royal Navy's last overseas bases until 1997. So there's a fairly large contingent of Royal Navy in Hong Kong. And so this is a little tribute both to the Royal Navy in Hong Kong and the Royal Navy generally. So flanking the flag bearer here are 2 petty officers who are on parade also, and they're marching with the SLR rifles. Now the SLR, as you know, stands for self-loading rifles with fixed bayonets, and the period that we've chosen to portray, basically because of the rifles, is the 1980s. And of course, this is also a kind of tribute to our Falklands War series, because during the Falklands War, it was the Royal Navy that really led the the sail down to the Falklands. And really, had it not been for the Royal Navy, the Falklands could never have been recaptured. Anyway, so it's a tribute to the men of the Royal Navy. Behind the little colour guard here, we've also got a Master at Arms. He's a Chief Petty Officer. The Master at Arms on ships and in the Royal Navy is basically in charge of discipline on board ships or at shore establishments. It's kind of the guy in charge of the naval police, a guy you do not want to cross. And behind him are 3 marching sailors, again with SLRs and fixed bayonets, and lining up here are a few more sailors at the present arms and a saluting lieutenant. And again, you can tell the ranks by the bars on their officers' sleeves. So that's our Royal Navy on parade. And last but not least, over here is a familiar set to many of you, or set of figures I should say, and it's basically King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Now, for several years, these have been available as single pieces. You can buy them individually. However, we've decided to put them all together and create a very special boxed set of King Arthur and 11 of his Knights of the Round Table. And that's what you see before you here. And the special box that we've put together, a really beautiful presentation box. So if you're looking for a present to give someone and you want it to be something that will really wow them, I recommend this particular set. It's a great set and great value as well. So as you can see, it's quite a big collection, and we've got a lot more where that comes from, but I think that's enough to be getting on with, and I hope you find something for you, and I look forward to hearing from you either on private emails or in the various forums or what have you. But in the meantime, let me take this opportunity to wish everyone a very happy, healthy and prosperous new year. And we're coming into, for Chinese New Year, the year of the snake. And we're really lucky because we get to celebrate 2 New Years in Hong Kong. We get the Western New Year on January 1, and towards the end of January we'll have Chinese New Year. So on the basis of that, I'll also wish you Kung Hei Fat Choi. Have a great time, don't drink too much, and if you do drink, don't drive. Okay, thanks, cheers.